Hey there. Sometimes we need to react to certain events in the browser and write code against them. Maybe we need to listen to a click, input change, focus, or blur. Maybe we need to do something wild like listen to a click anywhere within the document. Well, good news. We've got many ways to do this in Angular. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 common ways. First, we'll use a method called event binding. Next, we'll use the host listener decorator. And after that, we'll use an Angular output and an event emitter. And finally, we'll use the renderer2 class. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so event binding is used in the most simple of cases. And actually, we probably want to use it almost as a default scenario anytime we need to listen for events on an element. And only if event binding doesn't work for us would we reach for something else. Okay, so event binding in Angular is pretty simple to set up. We'll be dealing with our input here. And to set up our event binding, we'll just use parentheses. That's how we bind to events in Angular. And in this case, we're going to bind to the focus event. And when we focus in our text box, we actually just want to push a string into our messages array that we have in this component. So let's go ahead and add that. And we'll add a string of input focus. Okay, and when we check out what happens now when we focus, we see that an event fires. And when we focus again, the event keeps firing. And then we can add other events. So how about a blur event? How does this look? Focus, blur, and then focus, and then blur. And we can even do things like an input event. Now, when we come over this, you can see focus, blur, and now if we add a value, we see every time we typed a keystroke in, we got an event that fired or input change. Okay, so now what if we need to bind to an event on the host of a directive or a component? In Angular, we actually have a host listener decorator that we can use to do this exact sort of thing. All right, for this example, in order to demonstrate how a host listener works, I went ahead and added this app host listener directive on our button. And so what we're going to do is within this directive, we're going to listen for click events on the actual button itself. But we want to do this every time we put this directive on. So in this case, we're going to use our host listener event. So let's go into the directive for this. And let's go ahead and add our host listener decorator. All right, we have to import this from Angular core. Okay, we're going to go ahead and bind this click event right within our decorator. And we'll go ahead and pass along our event so that we can use it. We do this with a $event. And we'll name our function handleHostClick. And we'll have our event within this, which will be of type pointer event. And now just to prevent the form from submitting when we click this button, let's go ahead and prevent default. Okay, and then when the button is clicked, we'll go ahead and alert that the button was clicked. Okay, so let's see what happens. And there we go, it was clicked. So what if we actually wanted to react to the fact that our button was clicked and do the same thing that we're doing when the input events fire? So when our button gets clicked, we want to add to our messages array. Well, we actually have a way that we can do this from our directive. We can build our own custom event using an Angular output and an event emitter. Okay, so we'll add our output and event emitter within our host listener directive. So to do this, let's start by adding an output. And this comes from Angular core as well, so we need to import that. And let's call it button click. And it will be equal to a new event emitter. And this will emit a pointer event. And we'll also need to import event emitter from Angular core. And then now in our host listener function, instead of alerting that the button was clicked, we're going to emit the button click event. So now we need to go wire up this button click event. So let's go ahead and copy it. And let's go back over to our example component template. And now on our button, we'll wire up a custom event. And we'll push a new message into our list when this happens. We'll say button click this time. Okay, now let's see what happens when we click our button. And there we go. Our custom event now fires and properly adds a message into the list. Okay, so now this time we want to listen to click events on our document as a whole and react to those. So how can we do this? Well, we can actually use the renderer2 class because it has the ability to take in any element and listen to any event we want to listen to. So let's look at how we would do that. Okay, so since we only want to listen for these global clicks in this component when this component lives on the page, we're going to do it right from within this component, which makes the renderer2 a perfect candidate for what we're trying to do. Okay, so let's come over to our component code. And I've gone ahead and provided a couple of things that we need. We need to import the renderer2 and provide it in the constructor. And we'll also need our ngOnInit method and our ngOnDestroy method as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a variable for our body click listener. And we'll just type this as a void function. Okay, now we'll come set this using the renderer and the listen function on the renderer. Okay, now the first parameter that this listen function takes is the element that we want to listen on. So in this case, it'll be our document body. The next parameter is the event that we want to listen for. In this case, it's going to be the click event. And then we have the callback that we want to fire every time this event fires. With this, we just want to push a message into our messages array. This time it will be a body click message. Okay, so how'd we do? There we go. Clicking anywhere on the body fires an event. Okay, now when doing this, we also need to make sure that when this component is destroyed, that we properly clean up the event listener to avoid performance issues and memory leaks. So we do this within the ngOnDestroy method. And if our body click listener is defined, we simply need to call the void function. There, now this will be properly cleaned up when the component is destroyed and prevent any memory leaks. Okay, so now we have 4 different ways to listen to events in Angular. First, we had simple event binding for more standard use cases where we simply need to react to an event on an element. Then we have the host listener decorator, which allows us to listen to events on the host of our components and directives. And we can add our own custom events with an output and an event emitter. And finally, we can use the renderer2 listen method if nothing else works. So hopefully these examples give you a few extra options for building in Angular. Okay, if you have any thoughts or questions, leave a comment below. And you can find the link to the examples in the description below too. Thanks for watching.